I almost was not recording this for you.
Justin, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we got our tech.
Yes. All
I don't know.
right.
We seem to be having a bad tech day here. You weren't receiving me. I wasn't receiving you for a while. Now we finally have got through.
Yeah, finally.
Oh, well, it's good to see you in person. Nice to meet you there. I think my quarantine beard is growing a little better than like yours. It seems.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems here like so it's good to see you in person. Are we live now?
We are live now. Yeah.
Awesome,
I,
awesome.
yeah, I already did the introduction, but yeah, I was playing a little game with the audience while we were trying to connect here. I was playing some music. I'm trying to get them to guess who the musical guest was while I was waiting for you. But hey, no, this is
Well,
great.
I must. My apologies to the audience. There was a tech issue. We were on Google. We were trying through Google. I tried to reach Justin. He didn't get my invite. He sent an invite to me, but I didn't get it. So we went on Skype and we tried a couple of times, and now we're through. One thing in my work is that I often, when I schedule interviews, I often prefer to use landlines or phones there because I tend to find that they're a bit more dependable rather than like a chat or Skype. I always find that like tech gremlins can crop up during that there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fire away.
Oh yeah, no, I've got a lot of questions for you for sure. So I was just telling the audience. I don't know if you were listening in the beginning, but I was just letting them know that you were a freelance writer specializing in history and archaeology. And I guess the first line of questioning I want to ask you is just how did you get started in the field? Like, what led you to this? Like, were there any ancient stories or myths that you liked when you were a kid that just stuck with you, or how'd you get started?
Well, it's a long story. I've been interested in archaeology and history for honestly as long as I can remember. I always have. When I went to college, the first degree I did was in history and archaeology. I studied that at the University of Toronto. I started studying that back about 20 years ago, I guess now. And then I got interested in journalism partway through that degree. So when I was finished doing archaeology and history at U of T, when I finished that degree, I did journalism at Ryerson. And for a while there, I kind of did a mix of different stories. I wrote for local papers, magazines. I did everything: news, crime, sports,
Wow.
and whenever possible, I did history. And my history stories always seem to be the most popular. It seemed to me, judging by the technology of the time. I think my like the very first history story I wrote that I think ever really went sort of the what we would consider viral would be back in 2004. It was on discovery of a fortress in the Sinai Desert called Ras Boudran. I wrote it for a newswire called the Canadian Press, and it appeared on many local on many news sites around Canada. There was no Twitter or Facebook or even YouTube in those days, but it seemed to be popular by the standard of the times. It got picked up in a lot of newspapers there. I think that was the first history and archaeology story that ever I wrote that ever really went viral, so to speak. Although there was no social media to make it go viral, it all relied on a
Right.
newswire and people emailing each other and it appearing on a local crawl on a local news channel. So pretty like crude by today's standards, but still viral by the standard of its times.
Right. So you were mainly working out of Toronto area? Is that where you said?
I have, yeah, I work out of the Toronto area. Uh, um, I've been working professionally at a professional level since 2004. I started back when I was doing when I was finishing off my first degree in history and archaeology, actually, at U of T. And I continued working professionally as I did my journalism degree. Um, and I just kind of kept writing and writing, and as opportunities came up, I try to take all the history and archaeology opportunities as I could get. And in time, I built up a bit of a reputation in that area, and I've been able to sort of specialize in that area for the most part for roughly the last 10 years, about give or take.
Wow. Okay, that's quite the story. So of all your interests growing up, and maybe when you were starting out as a writer, it
Mhm.
seems like like from what you just said, you were kind of you were kind of you were dipping your toe everywhere, and then you started settling into history
Mhm.
and archaeology. Since then, it's probably been like what 15, 16 years since you've been doing this, right?
16 years, yep.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
16
during
years.
that time, I'm sure you've developed a few tastes. I'm sure you have a lot of stories that you were more interesting than others.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of stuff are you really into right now? Like, what kind of stories? Maybe even lately. And I've got a list of stuff that I want to touch base with you later on. Some of the stuff that you did dating back to last year. There's like this little mystery that I want to. I never got closure on. And I want to ask you about that
Mhm.
later. But
Yeah.
anyway, as of right now, what stories kind of stand out to you right now that you've covered?
In more recent years, I'd say I've taken a little more of an interest in the investigative areas, trying to get. I've been taking a look a lot into the antiquities trade, monitoring antiquities shipments, trying to find. Um, I've been developing sort of various tech techniques and tools to find shipments to detect them, which can sometimes be hard to find. I've been using a variety of tools. The use attack United States International uh, Trade Commission database, various U.S. Census info. I do a lot of FOI work in the I'm sending FOIs in the U.S. and Canada. Various, just sort of cold calling, checking sites, monitoring traffic. Just trying to get a sense of really large, unusual shipments and trying to determine they can be. It's a very difficult area, but you find some very interesting things, including a lot of mysteries, which I'm still, many of which remain not fully solved.
Right. Doing like you mentioned FOIA requests and all that stuff.
Mhm.
What is your research process really? Like, how has it evolved? Like when you started out, I know you mentioned a little bit of cold calling and stuff. Um,
Mhm.
w- did you just plug yourself into the network that way, and then you just started building, relationships with professors or whoever, these authors of various journals or what have you, whatever it is that you're looking into? Is that just how you got started? That's just that way?
How I got started? Yeah, when I got started, I wasn't really known really very much at all. So I really had to go out and just pitch stuff to people. I defined stories which nobody else really knew anything about, and I would email and call editors of various publications. At the time I started, 04, um, a lot of the social media stuff we have today just didn't exist. So I would just email and call, phone call. A lot of the specialty sites we have today didn't exist. Live science wasn't around back then. So I would try to pitch history and archaeology stories to more traditional newspapers and stuff like that. Try to sort of orient it towards their particular interest. If they were focused within a geographic area, I would try to find a story that would focus on their geographic area. If it was a local archaeological discovery or whatnot, so I had to tailor it. As time went on, that changed. You began to see more specialty sites appear, live science. There was one I worked with called Heritage Key. A lot more specialty sites now, where you could do a lot more general stuff. I also built up more of a reputation, so more professors and stuff would contact me. I gained more experience. I got a better sense of where to look for when looking for new material. And as technology changes, so social media developed, I became a lot more aware of where to search on those for sometimes some like new and developing stuff. So it's sort of it's a combination of changing experience and changing technology over time.
Oh yeah, and the technology really has warped in the past 16 years. So
It's changed very dramatically in 16 years. Some of the stuff I was doing 16 years ago, you'd be doing rather different now.
right.
So,
Have you done like any conventions or anything like that? Any
yeah,
like okay, great.
yeah, no, I've done quite a number of annual meetings. I go to as many as I can, generally in the Toronto area. One thing which your readers might be interested in to know, or sorry, your listeners, sorry, I should say, um, might be interested in knowing, is that the American Research Center in Egypt, they were going to be holding their Egyptology annual meeting in Toronto this year. Now, that was canceled because of COVID, but next weekend, next Friday, they're going to be having a virtual annual meeting, which is accessible to basically everyone. If you go to the RC website, that's American Research Center in Egypt, um, and you register, you can access that for free, and you can view, and you'll be able to view when all is said and done, dozens of really good presentations about the latest work in Egypt and Sudan from the comfort of your living room. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And one advantage, I suppose, one silver lining with this COVID thing is that I guess with the virtual meeting, I guess you won't have to be in Toronto if you want to see that meeting now. You'll be able to like access it virtually, even if you can't
Oh,
come up to like even if you're not in Canada.
right. So is that arce.org?
Yeah, I believe that's right. American Research Center in Egypt. If you Google it there, their homepage will come up. Just type on annual meeting. You'll see the register page. And you'll be able to just all you have to do is put in your email and a few other things, and you'll be able to register and sign up there, and you'll be able to watch from the comfort of your living room on Friday and Saturday of next week, and then I believe it's a Friday and Saturday after that also. So
Great.
it's spread over 2 week blocks. So that'll be a very interesting thing. But yeah, no, do lots of basically as many events that I can get to from the Toronto area.
Cool. I got the link right up on my screen right here, so I will put that in the description. That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sure my
Yeah,
listeners
no,
will be into that.
yeah, and that's a fabulous event. There'll be the very latest news from Egypt. If you want to find out what some of the latest stuff is there before it hits journals, before it hits news, that's an excellent place to go and watch.
Since we're on the topic of Egypt, this is a perfect segue into one of these articles.
Mhm.
One of these articles that you did. Oh my gosh,
Uh-huh.
the ancient Egyptian erotic binding spell article. Do you remember that?
Yes,
You want
yes,
to
I
tell
do.
listeners a little bit about that?
Mhm. Oh, sorry there. Oh,
Did I cut out?
sorry. There was a bit of a hiccup there. Are you? Oh, okay. So you're back on. Okay. Yep. The binding spell.
Yeah, the erotic binding spell.
Uh-huh.
do
Yeah.
you
Sorry.
do you remember that story? Like, do you want to tell listeners a
Oh
little bit about
yes,
that?
yes. Like absolutely. I read the journal article for it back in January, and I contacted the sources back in early February, and we got in touch. We exchanged emails. Um, I actually sent that in back in February, but I had a little bit of bad luck there because at the time I sent it in, all this COVID stuff was really heating into overdrive. And as a result, my editors really had to focus on that. So it didn't come out until fairly recently, actually, that particular binding story. But yeah, it's really quite fascinating. Um, a woman seeking out a man, a particular man in this binding spell. It's very common to find spells from the ancient world where a man seeks out a woman, but it's much rarer to find one where a woman seeks out a man. So it was rather interesting. I was hoping to get it up on Valentine's Day, but
Yeah.
the pandemic had other high ideas.
Yeah, that's really thrown a monkey wrench into a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as like those spells go, though, they're really not. It's not really a magic spell. It's more of like trying to manifest things into reality through their written symbology, right? Is that what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, I, I guess it depends on what you define a bit as a spell. You know, you could call it a ritual binding, trying to bring it there. But whatever term you use, basically, she was trying to use um, the elements of the supernatural world that she believed in to try to persuade this man to be with her. Now, whether it actually worked, we don't know that. Perhaps it did. Maybe he got the spell or some other hint, and maybe they hooked up and lived happily ever after. We don't really know. Or maybe he rejected her and she was very sad and found someone else.
Right, man.
So we never quite know the answer to of that, unfortunately, not unless we find some other inscription or some archaeological remain that we can tie to those specific.
And as far as dates go for that, that was about when was that? Was that like the Old Kingdom?
1800 years. That would be Roman period. So that was at the
Uh,
time when the Romans controlled Egypt. It was
right.
at the time when the Romans controlled Egypt. There might have been from judging from the names, it's possible that they might have been from two different ethnicities. She might have been ethnically Egyptian. He might have been more ethnically Greek, judging from the names. That at least that's one source's thoughts on that. We don't know for sure, but it's possible that they were from sort of different social groups, and that might have made it harder for them for her to hook up with him, and perhaps that's part of the reason why she cast that spell or that
Interesting.
ritual or whatever term we want to use to describe it.
Right. So Egypt is a fascinating subject. I mean, we could talk hours about Egypt, especially the Old Kingdom. Um,
Mhm.
it seems to me though that what the further back you go into Egypt, the more of a conundrum it is because it seems like at the beginning of their history, as far as we know anyway, it seems like they're already a fully formed, functioning, and pretty, I guess, what would you call it? A prosperous society back in the, like I guess the time of the pyramids, as far as you want to go back. But where do you think the early Egyptians came from? Do you subscribe to the theory that they're the stragglers of Atlantis, or do you think?
No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Let me tell your audiences, they're most certainly not the stragglers of Atlantis. The
Gotcha.
Egyptians came from Egypt. While there would be other groups, that would have that would have come into the country too, and would have gone into there in later times. The Greeks arrived, in the country, and there were certainly groups from Asia, Nubia, and Libya that came in there and came into the Theoid country. But at its heart, the Egyptians are from Egypt, with other groups coming in at times and joining the population.
Right. And they were about around the same time, maybe a little bit. They came a little bit after the ancient Sumerians, and you had another interesting article, the cultic
Contemporary,
war,
actually.
yeah, the cultic warrior god in Iraq,
Mhm.
the Ningirsu. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about that and a little bit about just
Yeah,
give them a little context?
yeah. Gursu, it's a site in it's an ancient city in Iraq. A team has been excavating there for the past few years, and been they've been uncovering an area which seems to have been the sort of ritual center of the city. It's kind of a plaza there. It seems to be the place where they focus a good bit of their ritual practice. And they found an area that's sort of at the entrance to this ritual area where they found a whole bunch of these vessels and animal bones that seem to be their remains from sacrifices and feastings. It seems to be sort of the entryway. And based on the cuneiform texts that were excavated a century ago at that site, we sort of put together the sense that the people were worshiping a warrior god named Ursu.
Hmm.
I might be pronouncing that a bit off there. That seemed to be the main deity they were worshiping in this area, and probably this offering area given at the entrance would have been done perhaps at the start of a procession, and possibly done in other ceremonies. One thing I should note is that the Sumerians' Mesopotamian civilization is pretty contemporaneous with Egyptian
Yeah.
civilization. The two really do run hand in hand there. It's actually a little bit of an argument, as to who got writing first. It seems as if Mesopotamia got writing before Egypt, but maybe not by very much before like Egypt. So,
And
um,
there's also the Indus Valley civilization as well. It's not too far behind those two, right? In
oh,
India.
sorry. The oh, I missed that there.
Oh,
East Asian civilization.
the Indus
Uh,
Valley.
Oh, the Indus Valley. Oh, yes, yes. The Indus Valley would also be contemporary with Egypt and Mesopotamia. Unfortunately, their writing system remains undeciphered.
Right.
The writing system would probably be based on the archaeological remains a bit later than Mesopotamia and Egypt, but we're still looking at more than 4,000 years ago. So we're
Yeah,
still
that's a long
very,
time.
very ancient.
So, what do you think they're? I know we're probably going to be we're probably going to speculate a little bit here, but what do you think their relationship was back in those days? No doubt that they were, they're relatively in close geographic quarters.
Mhm.
What do you think the extent of their interactions were? Were they openly trading? Were they exchanging cultures? I mean, cultural, I guess, language and trade and all, commerce, all of those things. What do you think it was largely peaceful?
Mhm. That's an excellent question, and it's good that it's interesting that you noted the Indus Valley civilization
Yeah.
because while the language which they use is undeciphered, we know from cuneiform texts that people from the Indus Valley traveled in considerable numbers to Mesopotamia, and the people who lived in Mesopotamia actually called them a name which I believe is best can be pronounced as Maluha. They would call them Maluhans. And from what we can tell, there would be fairly large numbers of Maluhans that came to Mesopotamia that brought assorted trade like goods, brought perhaps some craft skills they had learned. There seems to have been quite a bit of that. Now, how much interaction between Mesopotamia now, how many Mesopotamians went to the Indus Valley is a bit unclear, but there were certainly lots of Maluans, as the Mesopotamians called them, in Mesopotamia. And actually, some of the most insightful material we have about the Indus Valley comes from Mesopotamia, because while we can't read the Indus Valley uh, text, we can read the cuneiform text, and they can tell us a little bit about who these Malouins were. Um, with Egypt and Mesopotamia, there seems to have been a considerable amount of sort of trade and interaction that took place over millennia. In later times, if we get into the time of Akhenaten, the Amanar,
The Amarna kings.
yeah, yeah, the Amarna kings. Like we actually have diplomatic letters that survive between the rulers of Egypt and the rulers of various other kingdoms in the Levant and up into Mesopotamia. So we know that there was a lot of diplomatic exchange and correspondence
Oh yeah, there
going
was a lot going on during
on.
that time, especially during the time of Akhenaten, who happened to be the only like that the Amarna kings were the only ones that were monotheistic, right? And so
Yeah.
what
Well,
happened there?
sorry.
I'm sorry, no, go ahead, Owen.
Yeah, they seem to be monotheistic, or at least focused towards the on, to the point where they unleashed Han iconoclasm towards at least some other gods. That being said, excavations at Amarna have shown that some of the people who lived there still seem to practice or be devoted to some degree to other gods. So while Akhenaten himself may have been rather focused on the Aten, the sun disk, it seems as if many of the people in Egypt were not so focused on that one particular deity
So
to an
do,
extent.
do you think Akhenaten was sort of pushing this monotheistic agenda, like kind of driving discord throughout the society at the time? And perhaps do you think there's something behind that? Do you think there's like, I don't know, I don't want to get into conspiracy talk, but do you think there was some sort of influence, some group of people or maybe an entity influencing Akhenaten to do this? Because it seems, in retrospect, it seems like such a very unpopular move. Because as you said, most of the populace they weren't monotheistic at all. They weren't having it. And then the subsequent King Ramesses, like kind of, I don't know if you want to call him a usurper or he took back, he restored order, but it seems like there was a huge conflict there, and that it seems like
Mhm.
there's not a lot. It's not completely cleared up yet what was going on. I've heard so many different theories, like Akhenaten is actually the biblical Moses, and I've read so many things about it. But do you have any thoughts about what was going on in the royal court back then?
Well, it's as you mentioned, it's a bit of a mystery as to why Akhenaten pushed things as far as he did towards the Aden, even though it didn't seem to be all that particularly popular. In fact, we don't even have to wait until even Ramses before they reverse course. Tutankhamun, he was born Tutankhaten at the end, but after he came to power, he took the name Amun at the end of his name instead of Aten at the end of his name, to signify that they were going back to the way how things were before. And the inscriptions basically say that Tutankhamun basically disowned Akhenaten's agenda. He basically reversed it and ignored it. And Hamarna didn't really live for very long after Akhenaten died. It seems to have become abandoned, certainly by the end of the Amarna period, if not a bit like earlier. So it was a very short lived. Why Akhenaten did that, and why we see with all the changes in art that we see, that's a mystery. I don't think it's really any group of people. I don't know if it's so much any group of people who are influencing him. I think you have to really get down more to the psychology of the guy, what he's thinking, what his focus is, and that's very hard to get down to. after so many years. But I think it has more to do with his own inner beliefs, inner psyche, inner thoughts, than it has to do with any external influence. And I don't really believe there's really any connection between him and Moses or any of the
Right.
Hebrew. I think this is more on this particular guy's psyche more than like anything.
Well, a few centuries before the time of Akhenaten was this period known as I think it was either you or someone else wrote an article about the Hyksos elite from the Canaanite populations.
Yeah.
Do you think that may have some of those influences may have lingered on in the coming centuries leading up to the time of Akhenaten? Do you think maybe that has anything to do with that external influence that we were talking about earlier?
That's a very difficult subject. The Hyksos was defeated and expelled and left for the Levant. That being said, there certainly would have been people from Asia who came to Egypt, who lived in Egypt, who traveled back and forth. Um, I mean, it is quite hard to say, whether a group from Asia could have had some influence on Akhenaten. If I had a, I, if I had a guess, I would say probably not. I think it has more to do with his own inner inner preference for the on for the sun disk. I think it's more his own inner preference than it is any influence by any particular outside group. But that being said, it's an ongoing mystery, and new day data may provide more information in the future.
Right. Yeah, that's just I did when I did a video about the Hyksos elite about a year ago or so. That is to this day remains one of the most popular videos out there, and I totally didn't know that there are so many people interested in that snapshot of history. So yeah, thank you for shedding a little bit of light on that. Since we're in the area, the region, let's go back a little bit. Let's fast forward a little bit, a few thousand years, and go to just today. As I checked your Twitter page, I noticed that you sent out. I think your most recent article is the one about Jesus of Nazareth and these new findings. Yeah, did you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's very interesting to do discovery. Ken Dark has been excavating Nazareth and surveying a little bit of excavation and just doing general research in the area for well over a decade now. And he's also had the opportunity to review some older excavation finds there and incorporate those into his results. And he's found that Nazareth, at the time of Jesus, seems to have been a very strongly anti-Roman enclave, whereas people in nearby Sepphoris, where we're using Roman goods, were more willing to and had a more lenient view of Jewish purity laws in regards to manure and food, and were more willing to embrace Roman culture. People in Sepphoris were very much opposed to it. They did not use Roman imported goods. They were very fond of limestone, which is considered to be a pure kind of material under the Jewish laws of the time. They did not practice the practice of using human waste in manure, which goes against some beliefs, some Jewish religious beliefs of the time. And and perhaps most importantly, they participated in the revolt against the Roman Empire that started in AD 656.
Mm-hmm.
We see the remains of refuge caves there. On the other hand, Sepphoris stayed out of that revolt, even going so far as to mint a coin, calling itself, in which it was called the, quote, City of Peace. So the people of Nazareth had a very anti-Roman point of view, and that may have had some influence on Jesus, and may also help explain why Jesus may not have been so welcome when he came to Nazareth. When he returned to Nazareth during his ministry, there's a story told in Mark 6:4, where he comes back to Nazareth, and everyone and people in Nazareth, and including his own family, basically give him a very cold welcome. They aren't very too happy with him. and Jesus laments about it. Part of the reason might have to be that Jesus seems to have had a somewhat more lenient view when it comes to um, when it came to ritual purity. He was more willing to eat food that maybe didn't correspond to the rules of the time. He also had a message of salvation that provided basically an ability for people um, who were not just Jews, but also Romans also, and that might also have not have been received well because people in Nazareth were practicing a very strict interpretation of Judaism, and they were very hostile towards the Romans. So a message that was meant for Romans also may not have been very like welcome in that town. So it provides a lot of very interesting insight, which can provide more detail into these biblical stories.
Interesting. And another interesting part of the article, in light of everything you just said,
Mhm.
was the actual physical size of Nazareth itself. Because it seems, do you
Mhm.
think the Romans tried to diminish Nazareth as like a smaller hamlet, as you put it? Because, like you said in the article, there was
Mhm.
evidence of like agriculture and quarrying and stuff like that.
Mhm. That's a good question. From what Ken Dark has told me, after the revolt, it seems as if the population does continue on to some degree. That being said, yeah, it is quite possible there might have been some destruction there that might have occurred in the immediate aftermath of the revolt. But it doesn't seem as if there was a like whole. But it doesn't seem as if is a large scale abandonment that occurs over a long period of time. But that being said, one thing with archaeology is that it's very hard at times to really get a to really sort of narrow it down. Like there could have been a lot of people killed in Nazareth in the wake of the revolt, but we just might not be able to really detect that through the archaeological record. In any case, the area doesn't seem to be abandoned for a long period after that. People do seem to keep on living there, and there does seem to be a Jewish population that keeps on living there.
Interesting. Um, so what I one comment that I always get and from my listeners, and I always encourage. By the way, guys, if you guys are listening right now, any listeners right now, please send either me or Owen a tweet and with any questions you have. One question that always comes up is how the advent of agriculture and human settlement and writing, this transition from hunting and gathering to where we are now.
Mhm.
What are just over the years, just your gut level feeling? How do you think that all played out? Do you think like coming out of the Ice Age, uh, do you what how in your view, how do you think that we kicked off writing and agriculture and this, I guess, so-called stair step evolution of civilization? I know it's a big question, but just I guess you could try to pare it down a little bit, I guess.
Well, it's a good question, and one which some recent research has been shedding light on. There was a very interesting study. It came out a couple of years ago that showed that there was some earlier agriculture that was done in the during what I guess what we call the Ice Age around in the Levant, but it didn't really seem to really grow to become as big a thing to become a really big thing. It wasn't. It didn't. Agriculture didn't seem to really catch on permanently until sometime after sometime more recently than 10,000 years ago. And why it caught on at that time and not at an earlier stage during the Ice Age when it seemed as if some people were experimenting with it is a bit of a mystery and one which archaeologists are still gathering data from. So so why it kicked off at that particular time and not at an earlier time is actually a very good question. One which I kind of hesitate to speculate on because there's a lot of new research which is being done. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that we began to learn more about some agriculture that was being done in the Levant during the Ice Age, and but that it doesn't seem to have taken off very much. We also see the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, which dates back about 10,000, 12,000 years, was also is also was also a surprise more than a decade ago, with its incredible architecture there, which people were stunned at when it was found. Nobody could believe that something that ornate had existed at such an early date. So I think it's best to just sort of wait for new discoveries and incorporate them in. The way I learned about agriculture about 20 years ago when I was first in university is, I think, a bit out of date now in many ways. That was before Göbekli Tepe, before we knew about some of these early attempts at agriculture in the Ice Age, in the Levant. So I couldn't give an answer, but probably 20 years from now, it'll be out of date.
Oh yeah, for sure. In like 20 years, who knows what we'll discover by then. Where do you do you have any information at all about where they're looking now? Like, I know archaeologists, they tend to scout and they deliberate a lot on where to spend their grant money and their resources to actually execute a excavation. What are some logical places to try to find those answers in regards to Göbekli Tepe?
Well, in regards to Göbekli Tepe, the best places to search for are southern Turkey, the Levant, and the Middle East, and the sort of broader Middle East, particularly the northern part. Fortunately, some of those places are very hard. Well, I mean, right now with the COVID
Right.
thing on it, it's completely impossible. But even before COVID, there were a number of difficulties in those areas even before then. Um, Southern Turkey, depending on the security and political situation, has been well, it's been very up and down. At times, you can do work in the more southern end of Turkey. At times, it's very difficult. Like during the week, some periods there was ISIL was right across the Turkish border, and you really couldn't go very near that. Or if there were Turkish military operations in the
Yeah, like
south,
in Palmyra, there was a site, right, that
yeah,
ISIL destroyed, yeah, and other
that was in
UNESCO's.
Syria. Yeah, and Syria has been
Yeah,
completely out of bounds for 9 years now.
yeah,
And Iraq, the northern part of that has been come and go. At times, you can do work in the northern part of Iraq. At times, you can't. It just depends a lot on what the political situation is. Lebanon, it would be another area, but again, the political situation is very come and go. Is Israel's another good area, but again, political situation very come and go. So those would probably be the areas you would be best to find answers for, but those areas can be very hard to work in, just depending on what's going on. The politics and conflicts in the Middle East have changed constantly and drastically over the last 20 years. And depending on what's going on, who's at war with who at what time, one area may be accessible, another might not be. So, even before COVID struck.
right. Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, those are quite that's quite the list of hotspots there. But yeah, it definitely does depend on the situation. Yeah, that's another ongoing comment that in my 2.5 years of doing this. That's the second most frequent comment I get is, well, one is the Ice Age and the flood in Atlantis. That's always at the top, and I always have to address that. But the second one is where should we look? Why don't they look here? Why don't they look there? And a lot of, I think the average person just isn't aware of all the ladders and hoops and bars you have to jump through to really get an excavation going. And it doesn't help that there's all this civil unrest in those areas as well.
A lot of archaeologists who work in the area will tell you off the record that they love the archaeology, but they absolutely hate the politics of the region.
Yeah.
They hate having to deal with politics, conflicts in there. It's just really difficult. They love working with the archaeology, with the people, but the politics and the conflicts, it's just it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and the same thing goes in China too. It's really hard to get an excavation going in China. It's pretty few and far between. Especially a part of my channel, I go over a lot of more ancient human history, like Homo erectus fossils and Homo denisova and stuff like that. And one thing that I noticed was there really isn't a lot of archaeology done in China, or at least not as much as I think.
This is a very good point which you raise, and there's something very, very important here. There is actually a lot of archaeology work which is being done in China. We in the West just don't hear much about
Right,
it because
exactly.
most of it is published in Chinese. And a lot of it is what we would consider to be cultural resource management work. It's salvage work. So you would see publications of it in local journals or reports of it submitted to various cultural units. But there is a massive amount of archaeological work, but only a small amount of it is actually published in English or in but if you're able to read a Chinese, if you're able to read Chinese though, read Mandarin or
Hmm.
Cantonese, any of the dialect, you'll be able to access a vast amount of information. But there is actually a lot of archaeological work that went on in China. One of the most I got some very interesting stories from a journal that it seems to have gone into a bit of a I don't want to say that it stopped, but it seems to have paused at least. It was Chinese cultural relics. It was being published by a company by Eastview Publishing, and what it was is that it translated at a professional level Chinese journal articles that were published in Wen Wu, which is a very pop, popular archaeology journal in Chinese. And when it was being published, I was able to get a lot of stories there which we weren't hearing about in China, or sorry, which we weren't hearing about in the United States or Canada, in English language publications. And that was really valuable because there is a lot of just fantastic new discoveries that are being made there that we just don't hear very much about.
What was one of
Sadly,
the more interesting ones that you've read?
there was, oh, gee, it's hard to pick one there. There was, I've seen some tombs there that were excavated that not only would they have like just incredible amount of just fantastic artifacts, but that would have lengthy epitaphs that would describe the burials um, of the people who were buried there. There's actually, let me just pull one up right now. Chinese cultural relics. There were a number of articles that I did that became very popular there. I think one of my favorites, one of my own favorites there, I think, was one that has some beautiful tomb murals, including one with where there was which showed there were two tomb owners at a table, and there were two dogs on one side and a cat that was very plump and playing with I think it was something like a ball or something like that on the other, and the cat was very lifelike and drawn. It was a very beautiful one there, and there was one which dated back to the time of China's only female emperor. Dated back about 300, 400 years ago. I'm trying to remember now. And it provided and they found a very lengthy inscription that discussed the history of the Weka tomb owner and his relationship with the lady emperor. And it was very fascinating. If you Google Chinese cultural relics, you'll still be able to find some stuff. You'll be able to find mentions of the journal article, and if you Google Chinese cultural relics and live science after, you'll find a whole bunch of articles from when that was out. But sadly, it seems to have gone into what seems to be a hibernation for I think about 2 years now. I'm hoping at some point it'll reappear and we'll get to see more of it because it provided some stuff which we just do not see in
Right.
Western media.
Interesting. All right, Owen, I don't want to take any more of your time, but I do have to ask you about this.
Yeah, sure, of course.
February 8th, 2019, there was $90 million worth of Egyptian objects shipped from Canada to the U.S. Was there any closure to this story? I know you did an FOIA request for this. Did you find out what happened to that shipment or anything like that?
Oh, sorry, like which particular one are you mentioning there?
This was
Sorry.
this was in February 8th, 2019.
Uh-huh.
I don't know the
Oh,
specific. Yeah.
that shishimate there. Yes, that's the one which I tweeted about recently
Hmm.
on social media. That is an excellent question. I That was shipped. No, I'm afraid we have not gotten closure on it. That was a very interesting shipment. It was shipped. There were four like trucks that came that like shipped that material. I Before COVID got really bad, I was in the process of trying to completely rule out the possibility that it was a museum that was being shipped to a museum. I don't think it is because, to be quite frank, I can imagine that a museum would ship $90 million worth of Canadian, worth of ancient Egyptian, worth of artifacts
Hmm.
by shipping it across the border at Champlain, New York, on four trucks at 11 p.m. at night in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
It's just not something which a museum would do. You would ship it through a careful cargo or through a transit if you're a museum. You would not be putting down 90 million bucks worth of Egyptian artifacts
Yeah.
down a wintry road in Quebec, crossing into upper New York State in the middle of winter. It's just an incredibly risky thing. And I was in the process of trying to figure that one out when COVID struck fully. And right now, a lot of people who might have information or who I was trying to contact are just not available right now. Things kind of went up a bit before I was able to sort of fully solve that. But I am hoping in the future to have some more information on that.
So, what would you say is because there's the black market and smuggling and grave robbing, all of this stuff has been around well before, like for time immemorial. How much is it still a huge problem to this day?
Huge, 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 huge. But what staggers me, I there's a lot of tools that you can use to search for antiquities shipments. If you go on the use attack United States International Trade Commission database, if you get proficient with that, if you get proficient with some of the U.S. Trade Census info databases, you can pull up an incredible number of shipments. And what always overwhelms me is just the vast sheer number of these things that are being shipped constantly. And if you're monitoring Facebook groups that might trade in antiquities, you're monitoring auction houses, you're monitoring reports of recent looting of archaeological sites, it is just so massive. What's very sad, and what part of the reason why I've become so interested in this trade in recent years, is that it's become pretty much the exception rather than the rule to find a tomb which is intact now. Usually, if an archaeologist finds a tomb, it has been robbed. Now, sometimes that robbery has occurred in ancient times, but sometimes it's also occurred in more recent times. So it is just absolutely huge, the amount there, to the point where it's very rare to find completely intact tombs or a number of other archaeological finds now.
Yeah, not to mention counterfeits and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and and you always got to wonder with some of the stories that go in behind there. There's this one thing. There was this one find I reported on a couple of years ago. I never really found the full story behind it. It was a site in China that archaeologists. I had heard about this through Chinese cultural relics. They had published an English translation of a report. It was a site in China that had been recently looted, and archaeologists were excavating what was left of it. And within one of the looters' tunnels, that's one of the tunnels that the looters were digging, that they found human remains within those looter
Wow.
tunnels, and that looting seems to have occurred recently. So I'm very interested to know what is the story behind that person whose body was dumped in what seems to be a fairly modern looter's tunnel. I don't think that person died a very natural death.
Right.
But now that was referred to the local police, and I haven't heard anything more about it. So I don't know what the autopsy revealed or if any suspects were arrested. But there's a whole underworld out there which is devoted to archaeological remains, relics, and it can certainly be a very bloody like world. There were two antiquities guards in Egypt a few years back who were gunned down, and their bodies were left in a tomb which they were trying to protect. So it can be a very, very like bloody
As
business.
someone, I'm sorry, Owen. As someone on the periphery, on the outside looking in, it's easy to imagine these looters as just some low level thugs or something like that, carrying a burlap sack. But really, what are the odds that these looters are maybe archaeologists themselves or have those skills, or is that possible? Because like you said, there's a whole underworld, and it's probably been going on for
Oh,
centuries.
underworld. That's a very good question. Very pertinent question.
Have
And
people gotten investigated?
yeah, you do have to be a little careful about what
Right.
say for libel reasons
Oh,
and
right, 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 right.
there. I would say that there certainly is that is a very large, expansive underworld. There are many different groups involved. There are those sort of maybe sort of low level sort of people who dig it out of grace. In fact, quite often those people who work at the sort of who actually take it out of the tomb seem to get the lowest cut of the take, so to speak. You also get various levels of middlemen, smugglers, dealers, people dealers might work with, perhaps, and others that collectors might work with. It gets very murky very fast, and you can get into some very you can get into some pretty it's very sophisticated, very complicated, and to some degree there is some level involved with modern day scholars. I'm a bit careful how I want to phrase that, but there is some level that can be involved.
Absolutely. Say no more. Owen, it's been a great hour. Thank you so much for being so gracious with your time and doing this on relatively short notice. I mean, we just set this up within a few days, really. I
Mhm.
think I've always admired your work from afar. You sent me down many a rabbit hole. I just want to let you know that, and many of my
Yeah,
listeners as well. So please, I
yeah.
would love to have you back on just to discuss more because we could talk till the cows come home.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, so please follow Owen. By the way, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Jarus?
Oh, Jarus,
Jarus.
Jarus. Yep, and you could find me on Twitter at OJARUS.
Do you have a website or anything as well that we can direct your
I
listeners
don't
to?
have a website at this time. I just use my Twitter handle. I don't actually have a bother with a full like website anymore. I've just gone full social media now.
Got it. Well, please check out his Twitter page. He's constantly putting stuff up. And Owen, we will be in touch, and I hope to see you soon.
Well, thank you very much for like having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yep, absolutely. Likewise. I'll see you around.
Yeah, yeah, like see you around. Bye.
Bye. And that was the great Owen Jarus, everybody. Woo! What an interview. The guy is an encyclopedia of knowledge. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. He is really, again, a trove of knowledge, and he has a lot of information, especially toward the end there. No one seems to understand the depth of the underground, this underworld, this black market trade of archaeological finds. There's a lot of counterfeits out there, and he seemed to be a little bit cautious about what he said, but that should let you know about how serious this is being taken here. I will have him back on. Let me know what you guys think about that. What did you think about the interview? What did you think about what we were talking about? I had a whole list of stuff I want to talk about. We only got through like half of it. We went a little bit over time, but that's okay. I will have him back on. He seems like a really great guy. He was really friendly, very accessible. There was a little bit of a technological hiccup there, but that's fine. I mean, these are strange times. I will. We didn't have any breaks, but I will go to break now. By the way, no one's guessed. I've checked the comments here. No one has really guessed who the music was. So I'm gonna tell you the answer now. That was Chris Cornell when he was with Audioslave. Audioslave, if you don't know, was a band formed from the remnants of Soundgarden and Rage Against the Machine, I think, Tom Morello, and maybe one other band too. It was like one of the super bands. Kind of like Velvet Revolver, if you guys remember Velvet Revolver. At the bottom of the second hour, that I just played Velvet Revolver. That was Slither. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. If not, if you guys are among the younger listeners, yeah, go check them out. They're great. They're one of the great super bands. Again, if you guys want to attend the ARCE virtual annual meeting, it will be, again, online. It's free. It's open to the public. I go to my Twitter, twitter.com/JustinJG_ or twitter.com/Jindo. I'll retweet it on that as well. Or Owen Jarus's Twitter at OJRARU. Oh, Jesus Christ. OJARUS on Twitter. And you can find the link to the ARCE 2020 virtual annual meeting. Owen will be in attendance, so you guys could. I'm not sure how far they go for actual interaction, but you could sit and be, at the very least, be a fly on the wall for this event, which is starting next Friday, and it runs from April 17th to April 18th, Friday, Saturday, and then the following Friday and Saturday, April 24th and April 25th, all at 8 a.m. Eastern time. So yeah, definitely check that out. I will probably be going one of those, maybe two of those days as well. Really fascinating interview with him. I can't get over the fact that I was able not just to interview him, but just talk to the guy, man. I've read his. I'm not bullshitting when I say he's led me down many rabbit holes. He's led me to all kinds of research. Shit, I forgot to ask him about his book list. Fuck, damn it! I should have asked him about that. Yeah, I should have asked him about the book list. But I'll ask him next time. I have a feeling that we'll be in touch, and I'll have him on pretty frequently. The guy has his finger on the pulse on a lot of things. Really cool guy. Seems to be very forthcoming and honest guy too. Very smart dude. So again, yeah, check him out. Twitter.com/OJarus, OJARUS, and check his stuff out, please. So yeah, we are at the bottom of the hour. It's almost 2:30. I do want to get to listener comments now. I just want to spend the time. I was going to go into some more Homo erectus stuff, but you guys can just see the last video for that. I do want to get into some of these comments. There's a backlog of them. So let's just get through it. So Mario Simoni, our resident Italian translator, Italian to English translator, in terms of all the different articles that come out of there. He's sent me a bunch of links on my most recent video titled "Oldest Homo erectus Skull Discovered, Found to have Coexisted with Other Hominin." So he sent this one: a 50,000-year-old piece of string hints at Neanderthal intelligence. And there's a picture there. Since this is radio, you guys can't see it. But what may be the oldest piece of string ever was made by Neanderthals out of bark. So again, 50,000 years ago, that would place them toward the tail end of Neanderthal history. As far as we know, they died out about 40,000 or so years ago. So this piece of string is just a tiny fragment, just over 2/10 of an inch long. But the discoverers say it shows Neanderthals had extensive knowledge of trees it was made from, and enough practical ability to make a string that would hold fast under tension. So again, this is, although some of the stuff is rudimentary, it really does check off those boxes in terms of intelligence and their capabilities of creating not just tools, but this seems pretty advanced. Considering everything else, considering just sharp edges and hand tools and stuff like that. So a piece of string, again, made out of tree bark. That's like, how many of you could do that right now? Go in your backyard and make that without looking at YouTube, you cheaters. Okay, you cheating cheaters who cheat. How many of you can really do that? That's a tall order, really. And now it's being attributed to Neanderthals. And it's the first time that a string or cord attributed to Neanderthals has been found, suggesting they used other ancient technologies that have since rotted away. And that's the key, right? 50,000 years is a long time, guys. So if you're one of those people who says, well, where are the potsherds? Where are the potsherds? Well, yeah, where are they? How long do they last before they return to the earth completely without a trace? So again, string bracelet. Denis Silva had really intricate bracelets with perfect circles drilled in, seemingly drilled into them. So were Neanderthals that far off? I don't know. This piece of string again suggests they used basketry and clothing and fishing gear. So all that stuff is the logical path if you were to go down and extrapolate from a piece of string. I mean, why else would you use a piece of string if you didn't have clothes, or if you weren't fishing, or you weren't making other items, right? It seems to be a very important reagent in certain creations here. So the string was attached to a small stone tool found at the Abri du Maris rock shelter in southeastern France, which was occupied by Neanderthals until they died out about 40,000 years ago. So only the fragment of the string was left, but enough to be looked at with an electron microscope. And it is the oldest direct evidence of string that we have. So I'll have a link to this in the description when I upload this to YouTube. Again, Mario, thank you so much for that contribution. And then he also put another one on science.org, sciencenews.org. And two primate lineages crossed the Atlantic millions of years ago. New fossil discoveries suggest a second group crossed about 35 million to 32 million years ago. That is fascinating, guys. So that is way older than Erectus. Who could have been crossing the Atlantic back then? But there are some images of teeth here. The teeth of the newly discovered Eucalypithecus primate in Peru, and resembles those of primates that lived in northern Africa as early as 56 million years ago. So these four fossilized molar teeth were excavated in Peru's Amazon basin, which come from a now extinct lineage of primates that rafted across the Atlantic Ocean from Africa. So again, rafting does not, it goes back to this idea of oceans not being a barrier, but instead being conveyor belts. And if primates could have recognized this, then what do you think humans were capable of doing? It doesn't seem so far-fetched that the people in the depths of the Amazon, in remote places of South America with the Denisovan signal, it doesn't seem so far-fetched that they came from Australia and rafted, island hopped, whatever you want to call it, especially in more shallow waters, all the way through to Easter Island into South America. So that doesn't seem so far-fetched at all if primates were doing it millions and millions of years before this. I mean, this is close to, 36 million years ago, that's closer to dinosaurs than it is to us, right? I mean, the KT extinction was 65 million years ago. So yeah, I mean, that should put some scope onto how old this really is. The teeth closely resemble those of Parapithecids, a primate family that inhabited North Africa from roughly 56 million to 23 million years ago, says paleontologist Eric Seifert of USC in LA, Southern California in LA. So, and that's just right a hop, skip, and a step from where I am. So very interesting stuff. Thank you again, Mario, for that. And then I just want to touch base on this third one. And this one's about Homo erectus, and this is an Italian article from Il Terreno. My Italian accent's horrible. So this is just an interesting quote, and then we'll move on to the next comments here. So the main thing from this article is that erectus were scavengers, right? So, quote, the discoveries and dating are due to professors Giovanni Boscian, geologist from the University of Pisa, and Jacopo Moggi Cecchi, anthropologist from the University of Florence. So they say coexistence between Homo erectus and Paranthropus, which also is Australopithecus, it's interchangeable, may have been possible because they were not competitors in search for food. Paranthropus had great ease of feeding, even in the coldest winters. It mostly fed on tubers, seeds, and roots. To process this food, he had to chew for a long time, which explains the large and robust teeth, a low-calorie diet, and indeed, there was plenty of it, and foods of this diet were always present in all seasons. So it wasn't hard at all to grow food. It seems to have been a less treacherous time in terms of climate anyway than we are used to. This food was easy to conquer. So was Homo erectus standing there watching what his cousin ate, or did he steal from him? And the answer is most likely no. He waited for lions to move away from an antelope carcass. So they were scavengers, yeah. It is not nice to say, but our predecessor Erectus was a scavenger. What are today the hyenas and jackals? He had a very energetic diet, rich in proteins, procured carcasses left behind by large carnivores. And that was one of the theories when I did the mammoth bone shelter, that people were just waiting for the animals at the top of the food chain to be done, and one thing that they might have eaten was bone marrow, right? Getting into the bone marrow, and there's an instance of that in Southern California actually, at the Cerruti Mastodon site, which is dated to about 100,000 years ago or so, 100, maybe even older, 120 maybe. And those mammoth bones were tapped for their marrow. So again, that wouldn't be a new thing in terms of human activity and their behavior. Was it worth it? It was risky and difficult, but Erectus had the ability to use rudimentary tools with which he could break the skull to eat the brain or bones to get to the marrow. So again, yeah, maybe this is not all Erectus, hashtag not all Erectus, right? But perhaps maybe this was just an offshoot of them, maybe a community of them that just got by. That was their niche. Although there is no evidence of them using agriculture yet, but that would be, would you be surprised if Homo erectus was capable of growing plants? I mean, if that came out tomorrow and there was some sort of evidence that came out that they had potsherds with remains of roots or something, would that really surprise you guys? I wouldn't be that surprised. it'd be a really exciting find, and it would just crack open a whole new avenue of inquiry. But if Homo erectus had those skills, then man, if all bets aren't off now, they would definitely be off then. So again, thank you so much, Mario. You always come through every week. You are the MVP this week for sure. Next, Auntie Jen, relating to Homo sapiens being the last standing. We once got down to a severe genealogical bottleneck, so perhaps there was a global climatic upheaval or a comet that simply left a few. I believe this is why we all seem to come from Africa genetically. The entire world was wiped out, minus a few outside of Africa, African Neanderthals and Denisovan populations. But compared to previous numbers, vastly reduced. And extrapolate Homo sapiens to megafauna, which Africa also holds the most genetic diversity of. For sure, yeah, Africa. It seems like North America was the previous title holder in terms of genetic diversity until a comet, the Younger Dryas, pretty much killed everything on the continent. In terms of the big fauna anyway. So yeah, you're right. Africa is king when it comes to genetic diversity now. So we left one safe landmass spared and repopulated a sparsely populated world. Yeah, they inherited the world after most people were wiped out. So fossil-wise, archaeological site-wise, there was once thriving populations of others for scientists to find today. Auntie Jen, thank you so much for that comment. You are also the one of the MVPs. Yeah, I think what you just stated has been echoed in biblical accounts and ancient accounts, some variation of that story, of course, and in which a previous regime was just wiped out and a new generation, so to speak, a new regime takes over. And perhaps we are of that regime, or maybe we are just left to pick up the pieces of a once great, I don't know what you want to call it, empire, society, I guess. And one previous comment said we were living in Planet of the Apes, and that would make a lot of sense. At least maybe 2 million years ago, when Erectus was living with Paranthropus. Maybe they weren't keeping them in cages or anything like that, but just coexisting. And I wonder what that would be like. I would imagine. I was thinking about this. I would imagine it would be like living with an orangutan. Can you guys imagine that? Have you guys ever been around an orangutan? If you guys have been around an orangutan, let me know in the comments right now. But they are, I think that the word orangutan just means wise person or sage or something like that. And I forget which language, maybe Thai or something. I sound so uneducated right now. Please, someone set me straight on that, on the origins of the name orangutan. But yeah, I would imagine to be like living like that. They're just maybe they were completely innocuous. Maybe it wouldn't be like living with chimps. I think living with chimps would be awful and very violent. But maybe Paranthropus is just a more benevolent type of creature, much like the orangutan. So very interesting stuff here. Auntie Jen also left she left a bunch of YouTube videos here. You guys can totally check that out. Each vid is a 3-minute or 3 mini lectures, which are about TED Talk length, if you are familiar. So about 10-15 minutes perhaps, from the front lines in hominid research. So there's an annual conference there. You guys can totally check it out. So some topics this year that they're covering were Denisovan DNA, into Africa, and other things. I think Bruce would be really interested in that. Yeah, thank you again, Auntie Jen. You are the best when it comes to that. Another thing, guys, some of the comments aren't appearing. Like I'll get the notification of them from the dashboard on my end, the creator dashboard. But when I if I'm viewing it as just a regular subscriber, some of the comments aren't coming on. So I don't know what is going on. I do know that in light of the pandemic, in light of COVID, that YouTube, their employees aren't really working. I think most of it is automated. Maybe it has something to do with that. Maybe there's some trouble that arose from a lack of human resources there. But yeah, let me know if you guys are leaving comments but can't see them, because normally all the comments should appear immediately when they're posted. And I don't want people to be discouraged from sharing their comments because of that. And Mario was saying that his comments weren't showing up. I like the idea of one species essentially being the masters of another. Definitely makes you think. This is Pavel Datsyuk out of Detroit, Michigan, I'm assuming. Detroit Red Wings. That was neat hearing about the robust version. I need to look to see if there's more examples of that. Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do. The more robust version of Australopithecus, it could just be a regional adaptation thing. Maybe perhaps they are the same. They're viable. They can make viable offspring, but they just by virtue of adaptation in different climates and different regions and geography, they just maybe over a few generations they just became more hardy. Saya Academy. Agriculture began in Atlantis, pre and post Atlantis era rather. And there's a link there, Atlas of Atlantis. You guys totally check that out. So a lot of people say that they haven't heard much about the soil, the Terra Preta, the video that I did, the broadcast from last week. And yeah, you guys should definitely check out Terra Preta. Very interesting stuff. I don't know how. It's such a conundrum. I don't know how it's basically like magic. I mean, self-renewing soil. If you guys have done any gardening, you would know that after a few seasons, the soil is not even it's not as great. It gets depleted pretty quickly. So that seems like an issue that the early agriculturalists no doubt would have run into that issue. So it's very interesting to see that the Terra Preta even exists, and that at one point in history there were people who addressed that issue of a self-sustaining soil that is just black, Amazonian dark earth, right? Rowan O'Neill, ancient Egypt had black, white, and red peoples as pharaohs. It seemed more like the meeting place of all races and species. Very interesting stuff there. Owen just talked about ancient Egypt and its histories. And yeah, it's very fascinating. There was a lot of stuff going on in Egypt. And I mentioned the Hyksos elite that came from the area of Canaan. And it wasn't all Egyptians, guys. There were a lot of different demographics going into Egypt. And later on, when the Greeks came in, and then they had the Coptic Greek script, there's a whole history there of intermingling, and not to mention the Phoenicians and the Sumerians, and even the people from the Indus Valley civilization were going in and out of that area. So yeah, it is very interesting. Thank you, Rowan, for that. Rowan has some more stuff, actually. The Kuri say black and blue. They are the first peoples, not just of Australia, but of time, and their stories are everyone's stories. That's a very interesting fact. And if out of Australia and into Africa is true, which again there's more and more mounting evidence that it is, then yeah, that would be right. The first people period. And I do like that terminology, the first peoples. But the word peoples, again, I mean, what is considered people? Is it just modern humans? Or could it be Neanderthals? Are Neanderthals just modern humans as well? Should we just do a huge reclassification? What about Erectus? Does that count? Yeah, like there's a huge thing here. The first settlers in Australia found the shellfish middens and built Sydney out of them because they were so huge. Used it for concrete because of all the shells, but this shows the age of the settlements. I'll send some vids how ancients use life and how much they are to get an idea. So there are 2 articles here from Rowan. Check it out. It is in the comment section of Jindo Radio, April 4th, 2020. That was last week. Actually, that's a typo. That was broadcast on April 3rd. I just absentmindedly put the date that I uploaded it, April 4th, which is a Saturday. So I'm not going to go back and change it. You guys know. You guys already know. So yeah. Rowan and Neil, another one. Not burnt soil, but cooked soil. Mushroom compost can catch on fire due to composting actions. What's the fungus activity in all of this? The mycelium could play a big part in this. After the Australian fires near me, the first life to return the next morning was fungus. And yeah, that is true. Fungus just springs up overnight real quick. It brought back the wildlife, and to feed and water them all in one fungus. If the world was destroyed, then fungus would rule. Absolutely, I think you're right. Actually, I think the biggest life form, single unit of life, I guess, is a fungus underneath the Pacific Northwest of America. And there's a huge mycelium that's just like miles and miles long. So yeah, I definitely do believe that, and who knows how old it is. Um, but yeah, and if you guys live in the South or any rural area, not just the South, but any rural area that has cows, then you would know after cows poop and it rains, the very next day you'll just see a bunch of fungus spring up like magic, really. So yeah, I believe that for sure. Great comment, Rowan O'Neill. You are, I don't know if you're a man or a woman. I don't know. Rowan seems. I'm sorry. I don't want to offend you, but you are a great individual poster. Thank you so much, and commenter. Pavel Datsuk posted another article from Nature: the earliest unequivocally modern humans in southern China. So let's just read the abstract here. We got time, yeah. The hominin record from southern Asia for the early late Pleistocene epoch is scarce. Well-dated and well-preserved fossils older than 45,000 years can be unequivocally attributed to Homo sapiens are lacking. Here we present evidence from Fuyang Cave in Daoxian. So this is what I talked about last week. The site has provided 47 human teeth dated to more than 80,000 years old with an inferred maximum age of 120,000 years. So no doubt there was activity, modern human activity in southern China at this time. And again, this is a separate ecozone. This is a southern, the Indo, the Oriental ecozone, which southern China occupies, with an inferred maximum age of 120,000 years. A morphological metric assessment of this sample supports its unequivocal assignment to H. sapiens. The Daoxian sample is more derived than any other anatomically modern humans, resembling middle to late Pleistocene specimens and even contemporary humans. The study shows that fully modern morphologies were present in southern China 30,000 to 70,000 years earlier than in the Levant and Europe. Wow. So perhaps Homo sapiens, again, this is close to out of Australia, right? Southern China is just not that far away from Australia and Taiwan, or modern day Taiwan. So yeah, perhaps the Neanderthals did come in from Mongolia, the Palearctic zone, which is the northern half of the two ecozones that modern China occupies. If you guys want, you guys should refer to my previous episode for the maps on that. Our data fill a chronological and geographical gap that is relevant for understanding when Homo sapiens first appeared in southern Asia. The Daoxian teeth also support the hypothesis that during the same period, southern China was inhabited by more derived populations than central northern China. Very, very interesting. Again, it all seems to point that the more developed populations were in the south, and then it seems like they went up north, and then they met with the Palearctic, the more sparsely populated Palearctic people up there. This evidence is important for the study of dispersal routes of modern humans. Finally, our results are relevant to exploring the reasons for the relatively late entry of Homo sapiens into Europe. Some studies have investigated how the competition with Homo sapiens may have caused Neanderthals' extinction. Notably, although fully modern humans were already present in southern China at least as early as 80,000 years ago, there is no evidence that they entered Europe before 45,000 years ago. That's something that should be investigated. What happened 45,000 years ago that just barred entry of certain regions of Homo sapiens? This could indicate that Neanderthals were indeed an additional ecological barrier for modern humans. Maybe they were hostile, who could only enter Europe when the demise of Neanderthals had already started. It could be that maybe Neanderthals were gatekeeping the area from them. Maybe they were hostile, or maybe there was just some sort of other barrier that happened to coincide. The lifting of that barrier happened to coincide with the extinction of the Neanderthals. And that could definitely be a possibility as well. Great comment. Mr. Time Traveler says, my question, and I have asked before, why do Asians look the way they do if modern African Homo sapiens walked out of Africa into the Middle East and Europe? Asians, I think I did this one last week. I covered this last week. Everyone has different ancient hominid admixture. Verb B says, I'm not sure if this will answer your question, but East Asians have some of the highest proportion of Neanderthal DNA, more than Europeans. They also contain Denisovan DNA, and that is my understanding. Absent Europeans, Australian Aborigines, I believe, have the highest amount of Denisovan admixture, as well as that ghost DNA as well. They have DNA from, I believe, two different, that we know of anyway, previously unknown hominids. So that may factor into some of the phenotypes that are completely different. So we're gonna take. Actually, you know what? There's only 8 minutes left in the broadcast. That pretty much does it for some of the comments here. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. I had a great time with Owen. I will have him back on. He's just a trove of information. And if you guys have any comments about the interview, please send him a tweet or send me a tweet. Twitter.com/thejindo or twitter.com/JustinJG_. And I will feature your comment if it's cool onto the broadcast here. I really do enjoy some of the interaction with you guys, and I gotta pick the brain of a tech guy, because I want to have people call in as well, and not just Skype in. I mean, just like have an open a mode of transmission, not like ham radio or anything, just a simple call in. I gotta ask Darren how he does it. Actually, I think Darren does it the way I do it. I think he just does Skype. But yeah, if you guys have any information on that, please please direct me. Again, I do everything. I have to wear like 5 hats when I'm doing these things. If you guys want to support the channel, because I always get questions about this, you can go to bitshoot.com/thejindo and then just click the little $sign there, and then you can either pledge monthly, or you can just send a one-time payment on PayPal or coin payments if you're into cryptocurrency. So far, no cryptocurrency has been sent my way, which is fine. I just like to be, just have people, if people prefer that. There are some people who prefer that anyway, even though I've said that no one has used it. Anyway, I think that about does it for this broadcast. I'm gonna play you guys out with some music. I've been on a real metal kick lately. Rock and roll music, American rock, grunge mainly. Even though last week I was playing some like pops, some random stuff. I think I played like Britney Spears last week or something like that. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. I'm always open to your comments. You guys, every week is always some great stuff, and stay tuned for probably on Tuesday. I'll probably upload another video. And please, if you guys have any other guests that you would like to hear, let me know, and I'll try to reach out to them. And again, the Owen Jarus thing, I literally reached out to him 2 days ago, not even 2 days ago, just to set this up. And he was open. He was cool, and now is a great time to be doing these interviews because, most people's schedules are open. So we might as well strike while the iron's hot. So yeah, if you guys have anybody you want me to talk to, I am open. I'm willing and open to doing so. And we're just one Skype call away. So anyway, that's it for me. Thank you so much for joining me. Please stay safe. And keep those articles going. Remember, you can visit the ARS 2020 virtual annual meeting. Just go to ars.org, arce.org, and then just click virtual annual meeting, April 17th to 18th and 24th and 25th. Go hit that up, and I will talk to you guys later.